By the late 16th century, India possessed one of the largest economies in the world. It was the center of global trade, the land of gold, silk, and spices, a civilization renowned for its fine cottons, jewelry, and craftsmanship. Its cities were known for commerce, production, and culture. Bengal's wealth alone surpassed that of Britain. But by 1947, the day of independence, India's share of the world economy was not even 4%. This wealth didn't disappear on its own. It was taken. And not only through military conquest, but also through ledgers, taxes, and trade laws. The road to India's colonization began in 1640, when the first land sale to the English East India Company was approved. The first piece of land the English purchased in India was in the southeastern region, in Chennai, then known as Madras. They bought the land, built a trading port, and constructed Fort St. George. While the English were building the fort and arming it with cannons, some locals reacted by asking, "Hey, what's going on? Why are you building a fort?" But the English were also constructing a Hindu temple, the Chennakesava Perumal Temple, simultaneously, and even planned to finish it before the fort. When the locals saw that the English were building a temple for them, they believed the English were friendly and accepted them quickly. The English had arrived in India at the very beginning of the 1600s. Their initial goal was trade. In fact, they had first sailed toward the East Indies, modern-day Indonesia, Malaysia, and nearby regions. But the Dutch and the Portuguese had already established dominance there. The English East India Company had no navy strong enough to face the Portuguese, nor could it compete with the Dutch East India Company, which had its own army. So the English turned toward the Indian mainland to seek new opportunities for trade. The English set up their first trading center in 1608 in Surat and began trading there. In 1617, they received permission from Mughal Emperor Jahangir to build a factory in Surat, in northwestern India. Later, in 1638, they obtained the right to trade in Bombay. And finally, as mentioned earlier, in 1640, they completed their first land purchase and built Fort St. George on that site. The English had actually been late in entering India. The Portuguese had already been there since 1498. They had established colonies in Calicut, Goa, Nagapattinam, and even Sri Lanka. The Dutch also arrived before the English and founded a trading colony in Pulicat in 1600. Later, the English purchased land in Bengal, in Calcutta, and began constructing their second fort, Fort William. So, what suddenly allowed the English to grow stronger in India and gain new privileges? Without a doubt, they made use of political Islam. Yes, political Islam. The British somehow managed to influence Emperor Aurangzeb and persuaded him to declare Sharia law throughout India. Aurangzeb began enforcing a strict Sunni Islamic Sharia across the empire. Hindus and Shia Muslims rebelled against this, and they cooperated with the British. The British, meanwhile, acted friendly toward both the Hindus and the Shias, while at the same time supplying Aurangzeb with weapons to help him suppress the rebels. They also provoked Iran and the Afghans, India's neighbors, to attack India. In short, the British succeeded in using the virus of what we today call political Islam to divide India through religion. Just 100 years after the British made their first land purchase, India had already been fragmented like this. The Bengal famine of 1770. As the people died, the company profited. In 1770, Bengal suffered one of the worst famines in its history. Nearly 10 million people died. But the company's revenues increased. They continued exporting grain. They continued collecting taxes. For the investors in London, it was considered a good year. The market had replaced mercy. The myth of modernization. British administrators presented this system as civilization. We built railways. We brought education. We established a legal system. But the truth was very different. The railways connected fields to ports, not cities to each other. Education existed to train clerks for colonial offices. Courts protected debts, not rights. And the financing of the railways was a masterpiece of exploitation. British investors received a guaranteed 5% return. Any loss was passed on to Indian taxpayers. It was a financial system that made the country bleed without shedding a drop of blood. By 1799, India's fate had already been rewritten. The British East India Company controlled 2/3 of the subcontinent, and the remaining princely states were pushed into the so-called Subsidiary Alliance, a polite name for enforced submission. No independent armies, taxes paid to the company, and protection that somehow always benefited only one side. It was empire, disguised as partnership. For 2 centuries, Britain built one of the most efficient extraction machines in human history. They didn't just rule India, they monetized it. A civilization that once sold luxury goods to Rome, China, and Arabia was turned into a supplier of cheap raw materials for British factories. And they did it not with swords, but with taxes. This isn't a tale of nationalism. It's a tale of arithmetic. How does one of the world's richest societies become one of the poorest within a few generations? The answer isn't war. It's financial engineering. Dadabhai Naoroji wasn't exaggerating when he said, India was bleeding. Between 1765 and 1938, Britain drained the modern equivalent of $45 trillion from India, more than the current economies of the US and China combined. That money didn't vanish, it moved. India's factories fell silent as Manchester thrived. The global textile giant of the 1700s became, by the late 1800s, merely a cotton supplier. Dhaka's world-famous weaving industry collapsed. Shipyards, craftsmanship, metalwork all declined. Farmers were forced to grow opium and indigo instead of food. Industrial sabotage disguised as free trade. The uprising of 1857 came, but far too late. The company crushed it swiftly. In 1858, India fell directly under the British crown. Britain became master of an entire subcontinent without needing mass slaughter or traditional conquest. A corporation had done the work of an army. Between 1876 and 1902, famine killed over 20 million people. Yet during those same years, India exported millions of tons of grain to Britain. Even humanitarian aid was banned because it could distort the market. Empire chose profit over human life. Britain's wars, from Africa to Afghanistan, were billed to India. Indian soldiers fought across the world, and even their pay was deducted from India's treasury. The empire was built on India's back, brick by brick. Then something interesting happened. Empires stopped collapsing. They started mutating. The East India Company was gone, but the system stayed alive. No need to conquer nations anymore. Credit and debt could do the job. Empire simply changed shape. When India became independent in 1947, what remained was the wreckage, a gutted industrial base, evaporated capital, literacy below 2%, famine cycles, and crushing debt. And the world was entering the age of financial globalization. Exploitation no longer arrived on ships, it came through banks. Developing countries still lose over $200 billion every year in net capital flows to wealthy nations. The drain never stopped, only digitized. Britain couldn't be charged with invading India because technically the company had done that. It couldn't be accused of genocide because the company had carried it out. But the truth remains. India was colonized. What started in 1640 with a tiny land purchase ended 2 centuries later with the near erasure of a civilization. And India's story wasn't unique. The Dutch used the same model in Indonesia, the French across half of Africa, the Spanish in Mexico and Peru. It always began with friendly trade, then a small land purchase, and then colonization. Today, the conclusion is uncomfortable but clear. Empires don't collapse, they evolve. Modern economics still runs on colonial foundations. Value still flows upward, unseen, through financial and trade networks. But India is rising again. It has built new corporations, reshaped its monetary policy, and begun reindustrializing. It is now one of the fastest growing economies in the world. Yet the big question remains, can a system truly be free if it rewards extraction more than production? Britain's lesson: empires don't disappear, they change form. India's lesson: even the most exploited societies can rise again. But recovery takes decades, extraction happens instantly. That is the bitter mathematics of empire. Britain didn't conquer India with soldiers alone, it conquered it with accountants. And the ledger opened in 1757 has still not fully closed, only renamed. History doesn't repeat, but the balance sheets always rhyme.